Hey guys, how you doing? Coach Scott. So this is our first AP video, and again, watch this before we start talking about it, so life will be grand. So we're going to go over the first big idea, which is the atom, right? So we'll be going through atoms in the void, electrons and protons, the nucleus, the Bohr atom, neutrons, isotopes, and atomic mass. And we'll go over photon electron spectroscopy, or PES. Again, most of this is going to be a review for most of you guys, so this is going to be good. So let's go ahead and get started. Atoms in the void. This is more or less the history of the atomic theory. So 2,000 years ago, Democritus argued that the world is made of atoms, which are too small to see. So this is what he said. The universe is composed of two elements, the atoms and the void in which they exist and move. So he argued that atoms cannot be destroyed or changed, and the changes we see in the world around us are due to the changing arrangements and combinations of these invisible, indestructible atoms. Pretty huge for all that, because he had no measurement tools. So the Greek word tomos means to cut. So if you put a letter A in front of a Greek word, means not. So atomos means to not cut. So the word atom describes particles which cannot be cut any further than what they are. So let's fast forward for about 1,600 years. And then a guy named Dalton, he built on Democritus' ideas and the experiments of Lavoisier and others, and he formulated his atomic theory, John Dalton. Okay? And he's considered the father of modern chemistry. So he had a couple of postulates that he claimed. He said all matter consists of indivisible particles called atoms. Atoms of the same element are similar in shape and mass, but differ from the atoms of other elements. Atoms cannot be created or destroyed. Atoms of different elements may combine with each other in fixed, simple, whole number ratios to form compound atoms. Atoms of the same element can combine in more than one ratio to form two or more compounds. The atom is the smallest unit of matter that can take part in a chemical reaction. All right, and so that was the model that he had. It was pretty accurate. So neither Democritus or Dalton could prove atoms existed. All right, they were just postulating. That took more than 2,000 years from Democritus' initial theory. In 1827, the biologist Robert Browning used a microscope to observe bee pollen floating in water. So what he noted was that the particles of pollen, of course, pollen's pretty light and very small, were in a constant jittery motion. All right, so let's watch this video and maybe we can see if that can explain. Maybe. Or my internet may be really slow. And we'll see some of this Browning motion. Let's come back to that, because we're going to talk about this for a while. So, nearly 80 years, no valid explanation was offered. And then in 1905, Albert Einstein published the paper Investigations on the Theory of Browning Movement. So his theory was these little particles were constantly hitting the bee pollen in all kinds of different ways, right? Let's see if that thing's up yet. So that's what you see. This is Brownian motion, fat globules in milk. Okay, and that's only a 40-time lens. See how those little particles are moving? Okay. So his theory is that these are being bombarded with other particles. So since the pollen was struck in a random manner on all sides, that's what made it jitter about, making you think that it could be alive. So what Einstein did is he mathematically proved the atomic theory. Now some people believe it's the most important factor that helps us understand the world in which we live. In fact, Richard Feynman, who won the Nobel Prize, he's an American physicist, said this, and let's read this. If in some cataclysm all of scientific knowledge were to be destroyed,
it is worthwhile looking at
and only one
what we
sentence.
call the Brownian motion.
Okay. And only one sentence pass on to the next generations of creatures, what statement would contain the most information in the fewest words? I believe it is the atomic hypothesis that all things are made of atoms, little particles that move around in perpetual motion, attracting each other when they are a little distance apart, but repelling upon being squeezed into one another. In that one sentence, you will see that there is an enormous amount of information about the world, if just a little imagination and thinking are applied. So this is pretty huge. So, atoms. All matter in the universe is composed of these basic building blocks. We call them atoms. An atom is almost the smallest indivisible, indestructible unit of matter. And they're really small. If you were to make a tiny dot with the tip of a sharp pencil, that little dot would contain 4 times 10 to the 18th atoms. That's a bunch of atoms. Just a little bitty dot with a pencil. So, that's the introduction. We're going to stop recording this now, and then I'll throw another one out here for you later. We'll talk about electrons and